Fallout's wasteland has always felt like a place where reality bends softly at the edges, where the ruins carry more than stories, and the wind seems almost aware of the footsteps crossing its broken roads. There's a gentle theory that suggests the moment the Great War ended, the boundaries between memory and matter thinned so dramatically that pieces of the old world became woven into the very physics of the new one. That's why certain objects feel heavier than they should, or why some rooms hold echoes that seem too emotional to be purely environmental. It imagines the wasteland not just as a landscape, but as a giant archive of feelings stamped into concrete and dirt by the instant the world broke. According to this quiet speculation, the reason some locations feel nostalgic is because the land itself remembers for you, replaying emotional residue like ghosted photographs trapped in the atmosphere. There's a theory surrounding the Enclave that whispers about a hidden genetic marker embedded in certain pre-war medical injections. A marker meant to identify citizens chosen for repopulation in the event of nuclear catastrophe. These injections, disguised as everyday vaccines, may have been distributed far more widely than anyone realized. After the bombs fell, the marker became nearly useless, except for its strange influence on certain individuals across the wasteland who seem unusually resistant to disease or who never suffer fatal radiation sickness. Theorists suggest these survivors may be descendants of people unknowingly tagged by the government, the genetic equivalent of a forgotten VIP list meant to rebuild civilization. If true, the wasteland may be quietly shaped by invisible bloodlines selected for a future that never arrived. Others believe that remnants of weather manipulation research still linger across the ruins, subtly guiding storms and winds, even centuries after the infrastructure failed. Some storms follow suspiciously consistent paths, sweeping across the same valleys every few weeks with clockwork regularity. According to the theory, old atmospheric relay towers continue to fire off incomplete commands, influencing cloud formation and radiation distribution like half-functional heartbeat monitors. These towers, damaged but not dead, may still attempt to stabilize weather patterns using fractured pre-war algorithms. Every storm becomes a memory of what the world intended to be controlled, predictable, artificially maintained, now glitching through a planet that no longer understands the rules written for it. A softer theory drifts around the topic of the Pip-Boy itself, imagining that the device wasn't just a survival tool, but also a psychological tether. Some believe the Pip-Boy subtly adjusts its brightness and color temperature based on the wearer's stress levels, measuring heart rate and grip tension through the casing. When wanderers feel anxious, the screen might warm its hue to calm the eyes, or brighten in dangerous darkness, as if trying to reassure you. This theory interprets the Pip-Boy as the last friendly relic of the old world, a companion designed to stay close, to keep you grounded, to gently guide your emotions in a landscape where isolation and fear are as deadly as radiation. In this view, the Pip-Boy isn't just technology, it's a quiet guardian. There is a theory about the strange metallic groans heard in abandoned factories, as if old machines still shift in their sleep. Some players swear these sounds don't always match the structure they come from, echoing too clearly or traveling in the wrong direction. The speculation claims these noises are the remnants of automated testing cycles still running deep beneath the ruins. Even after centuries of decay, dormant machinery may continue to perform diagnostic routines at unpredictable intervals, causing the entire structure to shift ever so slightly. The buildings themselves become restless, haunted not by spirits but by the last breath of industry refusing to die. Every groan is a ghost of electricity, a memory of motion replaying through rust. Another theory suggests that memory itself behaves strangely in Fallout's world. Wanderers often report moments of deja vu when entering specific caves or abandoned homes, even on their first visit. According to this idea, certain locations hold emotional imprints created by the intensity of events that occurred during the Great War. These imprints, though invisible, influence perception, making the brain experience false familiarity as it resonates with the echoes of past trauma. The wasteland becomes a kind of psychic topography, its emotional hotspots replayed subconsciously in any living being that steps near them. This theory paints the world as a tapestry of leftover feelings, each ruin carrying a different emotional climate long after its inhabitants vanished. There's a rumor circulating among scholars and wanderers that the Red Menace arcade cabinet, seen in various ruins, wasn't merely a pre-war game, but a training simulation quietly used to measure reaction times, hand-eye coordination, and psychological compliance. The theory suggests the government embedded subtle patterns within the gameplay, designed to condition players to anticipate certain movements, react to specific visual cues, and subconsciously absorb patriotic messaging. When survivors encounter these machines in the wasteland, the faint hum they emit, even when unpowered, has led some to believe they contain dormant neural patterning hardware, still attempting to train whoever lingers nearby. In this interpretation, even childhood games were part of a much larger pre-war plan to shape the population. A darker theory examines the quiet, unmarked bunkers often found beneath hills or hidden along mountain paths. These compact, windowless structures sometimes contain chairs bolted to floors, recording equipment, or sealed rooms with no explanation. Some believe these bunkers were testing sites designed to study sensory deprivation and time dilation in controlled environments. Participants may have been kept underground for weeks, monitored for behavioral breakdowns or psychological resilience. After the bombs fell, every project ended in an instant, leaving behind rooms filled with the echoes of unfinished experiments. The idea that some survivors unknowingly wander through forgotten laboratories of human endurance adds a subtle chill to every rusted hatch pried open in the wild. Others theorize that the world's mutated animals evolved not merely by chance, but through fragmented remnants of genetic manipulation calculated decades before the war. Scattered logs reference experiments on desert wildlife, swamp creatures, and even house pets, suggesting a pre-war effort to engineer species that could survive extreme climates. The theory suggests that when the bombs fell, these genetically altered animals adapted far faster than expected, forming the foundation of the mutated ecosystem now present. The wasteland becomes not a random outcome, but the accidental realization of humanity's hubris in reshaping natural life for imagined futures that never came. A more philosophical theory proposes that Fallout's world contains memory echoes, faint environmental impressions capable of influencing behavior across large groups. Settlements built near emotionally charged ruins, places where large numbers of people died or suffered, often develop similar personality traits like paranoia, superstition, or unwavering hope. The theory frames this as a natural psychological reaction amplified by residual emotional energy embedded in the land. Each community takes on traits shaped by history it doesn't consciously know, becoming living reflections of the forgotten stories written into the soil. Some wanderers speculate that Vault-Tec designed certain vaults with secret oversight chambers, small rooms meant not for overseers, but for off-site observers using early holographic technology. These chambers were supposedly linked through experimental fiber optic networks capable of transmitting 3D images across continents. The Great War destroyed the infrastructure, leaving disconnected chambers scattered beneath the earth. Now, anyone who discovers these rooms finds only silent projectors and dark screens, never realizing they once supported experiments meant to be watched by eyes hundreds of miles away. The vault residents were never as isolated as they thought. They were performers in a show for a world that burned before it aired. There's an eerie theory about mannequins placed around the wasteland in strange or unsettling poses. Some believe their positions aren't random, that they were used for early crowd control simulations in pre-war military training. Their distribution across abandoned towns and factories could have been intentional, part of exercises designed to test personnel under pressure in environments mimicking panic. Over time, storm winds, collapsing ceilings, and radiation warping may have altered their arrangement, producing the surreal scenes found today. According to this view, the mannequins are frozen actors in forgotten drills, their final positions shaped by both human design and centuries of decay. Another theory claims that the strange static bursts, heard when switching between radio frequencies, are more than simple interference. These bursts may be fragments of encrypted messages transmitted by a pre-war intelligence network still running partially automated tasks. With each shift in weather or atmospheric pressure, leftover signals might attempt to re-establish connections, creating brief moments where forgotten data flickers through the air. Anyone tuning in hears only noise, unaware they are brushing against the edges of an ancient communication grid, still fighting to carry out orders it received on the last day of the world. There's a belief among some scholars that the holographic displays used in pre-war facilities might have been prototypes of advanced memory storage technology, capable of imprinting human thoughts onto light waves. If so, anyone who steps into these facilities may catch brief flashes of shapes or colors not generated by current power, but by echoes of the last images ever processed by the machines. These holograms, replaying tiny distortions in the air, could be visual fossils of memories belonging to people who died centuries ago. Seeing a flicker of light in an empty lab becomes less a glitch and more the shadow of someone's final thoughts. Finally, a gentle theory rises among travelers who rest beneath rusted billboards and collapsing skyways, gazing across the miles of dust-softened horizon. They imagine that the wasteland watches its wanderers with something resembling affection. In certain sheltered valleys or abandoned farms, the world seems to shield survivors from the worst dangers, storms breaking around cliffs, predators avoiding well-worn paths, trapped doors cracking open just as someone needs shelter. In this theory, the world isn't cruel but caring in subtle ways, a silent partner guiding those who choose to keep moving. The wasteland becomes not a graveyard, but a guardian its quiet presence, a reminder that even in ruin, there remains something soft, something patient, something gently hopeful beneath all the ash. Across the forgotten stretches of the wasteland, some wanderers claim that the ruins of old American suburbs hold more purpose than people realize, as though their identical layouts are not just relics of a once uniform culture, but echoes of a larger design etched into the land like a memory that refuses to fade. Travelers sometimes notice that the curvature of certain cul-de-sacs aligns almost perfectly with military grid coordinates, suggesting these neighborhoods were intended not as normal homes, but as subtle components in a vast geographic code. If the old world ever needed to activate some buried system woven into the nation's infrastructure, these patterns would have created an invisible circuit across the landscape, one that remains intact even centuries after the last families fled. The uniformity, instead of feeling soulless, starts to feel like ritual America carving a quiet message into its own soil. Far out in the Mojave, The roads that wind between distant outposts sometimes hum during especially dry nights, a faint vibration heard only when the wind dies completely. Those who camp beside these highways say the sound resembles engines from long-lost caravans or perhaps convoys that never reached their destinations on the day the bombs fell. One theory suggests these vibrations come from dormant resonance sensors buried beneath the asphalt, part of a pre-war project meant to detect troop movements or incoming threats. With no one left to monitor them, the sensors still trigger under shifting temperatures or gusts of wind, replaying phantom echoes of the old world's final day. It turns the desert quiet into something haunted, like the earth itself is reliving a memory it cannot let go of. Deep within the capital wasteland, the metro tunnels sometimes carry gusts of warm air that defy all logic, drifting through cracks in the concrete like whispers from a hidden furnace. Some believe these drafts are remnants of backup geothermal systems built to power the capital in emergencies, systems that may still operate beneath miles of bedrock. If that's true, then somewhere under Washington, D. lies a chamber of forgotten machinery, still pushing heat through rusted ducts in an attempt to keep a dead city alive. The warmth feels almost comforting, like the final breath of a metropolis that refuses to surrender to the cold void of history. The common belief that the wasteland is devoid of magic occasionally fractures when travelers stumble upon moments that feel too strange to dismiss as coincidence. Some swear that when storms pass over old burial grounds, the lightning grows quieter, almost respectful. Others claim that rain falling near crashed aircraft seems tinged with faint metallic taste, as if drawn to the memories of steel that once ruled the skies. These observations gave rise to a theory that radiation isn't just mutation, it's emotional conduction. The wasteland absorbs the feelings of the places it destroyed, replaying them through weather patterns like a broken symphony of grief and remembrance. The sky becomes a storyteller, painting sorrow across clouds that no longer remember sunlight clearly. Many believe the Enclave's radio broadcasts contain encoded fragments far beyond their obvious messages. Behind the patriotic speeches and clipped military tones, there are moments where static hums in strangely rhythmic intervals. Some wasteland analysts have recorded these hums and realized they resemble heartbeat patterns, too organic to be accidental. The theory says the Enclave embedded biological signatures in their transmissions as a form of identity confirmation, a living watermark that ensured only their own technology could process the full message. If true, then every Enclave signal carries a piece of someone's heartbeat, pulsing across dead airwaves like a ghost insisting it still matters. The scattered remains of pre-war robotics sometimes exhibit behaviors that seem less mechanical and more instinctual. In abandoned factories, broken protectrons occasionally turn their heads toward footsteps even when their power cores are depleted. Their eye lenses flicker faintly as if responding to something unseen, perhaps the electromagnetic residue of living beings passing by. Some theorists suggest these machines retain a kind of dormant awareness, a spark of artificial instinct encoded deep within their primary circuits. It may not be consciousness, but it feels like the first breath of something learning how to sense the world long after its creators vanished. The machines behave like fossils remembering what it felt like to be alive. There are reports from wanderers who claim that certain mutated plants bloom in patterns that match constellations visible before the Great War. These glowing blossoms, scattered across irradiated marshes and forgotten valleys, appear only during specific lunar phases, as though responding to celestial rhythms lost to the world above. One theory proposes that pre-war botanists engineered star-responsive flora as part of experiments involving nocturnal navigation. Alternatively, radiation itself may have awakened dormant genetic instructions tied to skyward cycles. Either way, the wasteland's flowers seem to reach not for sunlight, but for starlight, searching the heavens for guidance in a world that lost its way. Wanderers in the Commonwealth sometimes encounter terminals that display lines of text seemingly unrelated to their location. A log in an abandoned garage might reference a desert storm near Nevada, while a terminal in a ruined library mentions coordinates tied to Alaska. These cross-region glitches lead to speculation that pre-war networks were far more interconnected than people realized, forming a nationwide web of shared memory. When the bombs fell, the network shattered, but fragments of data persisted, drifting like electronic dust across the remains of America. Occasionally, those fragments settle into surviving machines, creating moments where terminals seem to whisper secrets from distant wastelands, binding all the stories together in quiet, accidental unity. There is a theory that supermutants aren't as mindlessly aggressive as they appear, but rather follow internal patterns that mimic primitive societies. Observers have noticed that mutants sometimes decorate their camps with symmetrical arrangements of bones or scrap, forming shapes that resemble territorial markings or ritualistic symbols. These patterns often repeat across different regions, despite having no communication between groups, suggesting a shared instinct encoded by the forced evolutionary virus. Under this theory, supermutants aren't chaotic. They're building the first signs of a new culture, shaped by the faint echo of ancient human impulses, transformed by mutation into something unrecognizable, yet strangely familiar. Some wanderers swear that the Mojave's starry nights contain anomalies, tiny flickers that appear in fixed positions for only a moment before vanishing completely. These flickers don't align with known constellations or aircraft patterns. A theory emerged that the flickers are reflections from forgotten orbital platforms still drifting far above the planet, their solar panels catching moonlight as they rotate silently across the void. If true, the sky of Fallout still holds pieces of the old world, fragments of ambition preserved in cold vacuum, watching the ruins below with unblinking eyes of metal and regret. In the heart of the Commonwealth, certain holotapes left by long-dead scientists describe research into emotional contagion, the idea that strong feelings leave physical traces in the air, detectable by sensitive equipment. These records mention prototypes that could map fear or joy, like thermal signatures. Though the technology was never fully developed, some theorists believe environmental radiation may have interacted with these early experiments, creating zones where emotional energy lingers unnaturally. When wanderers say a place feels sad, the sensation may not be metaphorical. The world might genuinely hold the final emotions of those who died there, preserved in radiation like fingerprints in wet concrete. There is a belief that the cratered landscapes surrounding old nuclear detonation sites behave like wounds, slowly scarring over in ways that mimic living tissue. Mutated moss grows in ring shapes around the impact points, and certain creatures instinctively avoid the exact centers, as if sensing something dangerous beneath the soil. Some scientists claim these patterns are simply chemical gradients, but wanderers prefer a gentler theory, that the earth remembers pain. The glowing pits, so eerily quiet at dusk, seem to pulse with a rhythm too steady to be random, like the heartbeat of a planet healing in its own slow, mournful way. A quiet pattern noticed by many players is that the wasteland's birds rarely perch on broken power lines, instead gathering on poles or branches unaffected by electricity. Some believe these birds sense electromagnetic remnants still flowing through the old grid, stray currents too faint for machines but strong enough to repel wildlife. If this theory holds true, then America's dead power network is not entirely dead. Its invisible strands hum softly beneath the sky, a ghost infrastructure still running on memories of energy it once carried proudly across a vibrant nation. Vault-Tec's architectural choices often appear random, yet some theorists propose they reflect hidden psychological experiments designed to manipulate emotional responses to space. Curved hallways induce calmness, narrow rooms heighten anxiety, and sudden open chambers simulate relief. If wanderers notice that certain vaults feel strangely warm or strangely cold, they might be experiencing deliberate sensory conditioning. In this theory, the vault dwellers weren't simply living underground, they were participating unknowingly in a vast study of human resilience, their emotions carefully shaped by the very walls around them. Near remote bunkers hidden in cliffs or forests, explorers sometimes hear faint metallic tapping echoing through the rocks. The sound is too rhythmic to be natural, like a repeating code signal trapped beneath layers of earth. One idea suggests these are remnants of automated distress systems, still trying to signal for help centuries after the last technician fell. Without receivers, the signals bounce endlessly within their own chambers, creating a loop of desperation that resounds through stone. It's a lonely thought, machines crying for aid into a world too broken to answer. In regions where firestorms once raged, some survivors report seeing heat hazes shimmering over cold ground, even on windless days. These distortions resemble mirages, flickering like distant flames that never consume or fade. According to one theory, the intense heat of nuclear detonations may have altered the fabric of local air currents permanently, embedding ghost patterns that replay during certain conditions. When travelers stumble upon these shimmering illusions, they may be witnessing atmospheric scars, memories of the fire that ended the world, still burning in the air long after the land cooled. There is a gentle theory that companions across Fallout games share more than just mechanical scripting. They share echoes of an ancient human desire to protect others. People notice how some companions hum tunes from regions they never visited or react emotionally to sights they shouldn't recognize. It suggests that the wasteland preserves fragments of humanity's collective memory, passing them from person to person like drifting stories caught in the wind. Companions become carriers of inherited emotion, living reminders of the world that once was, and the world that stubbornly tries to grow again. And at the heart of all these theories lies one final, quiet belief that the wasteland, for all its harshness and ruin, holds a kind of kindness woven into its silence. There are places where storms split apart to avoid lonely travelers, where the sun warms ruined metal just enough to rest upon, where the empty world feels like it's listening rather than judging. Under this theory, Fallout's world isn't punishing survivors, it's mourning alongside them. Every broken structure, every flickering light, every whisper of wind becomes a gentle reminder that even ruined worlds can remember what it means to care. Some travelers who wander the ruins of the capital wasteland have noticed that certain buildings seem warmer inside than the air outside, even in the coldest nights with no heat sources nearby. According to one theory, remnants of old insulation materials might be slowly releasing stored thermal energy from the moment the bombs fell, acting like memory foam for temperature, absorbing the heat of the final daylight before impact and releasing it in tiny increments centuries later. This idea paints those crumbling structures as time capsules, radiating the literal warmth of a day that marked the end of the world. People who stand inside these buildings at night often describe a strange, heavy comfort, like stepping into the last preserved breath of the pre-war sun. Others believe the scattered skeletons found across the wasteland fall into patterns too consistent to be random. Bones resting beside cracked radios, skeletons found near boarded windows, or families grouped together in corners hint at a shared instinct among survivors during the final moments. The theory suggests humanity experienced a kind of psychic shock when the bombs dropped, a moment of overwhelming emotion so powerful that it shaped the behavior of millions simultaneously. People moved toward specific objects, specific corners, specific windows, guided not by logic, but by a collective, unconscious response to fear. This theory imagines the wasteland as a tapestry of human instinct frozen in place, a world filled with silent echoes of final choices. Some argue that the Nuka-Cola Corporation wasn't just producing drinks, but shaping national culture with psychological imprinting embedded into flavors. The oversweet formulas, the exciting colors, the radioactive glow of quantum, they all catered to emotional impulses tied to escapism. The theory suggests Nuka-Cola was subtly training the population to feel comfort in artificial experiences, preparing society to live in simulations, vaults, or world-altering projects where people could no longer rely on the natural world. If true, every glowing bottle becomes a relic of a company that engineered joy as a form of compliance, a taste that lingers in the wasteland like a memory of manipulated happiness. Another theory centers on the eerie quiet that permeates abandoned suburbs. In these perfectly frozen neighborhoods, where houses sag in the same ways and yards collapse in identical patterns, some believe the environment reacts to human presence. They describe faint rustling in rooms you haven't entered yet, or the subtle shift of curtains long after a breeze has passed. According to this theory, the suburbs aren't haunted in the supernatural sense. Instead, they're saturated with electromagnetic residue from countless electrical devices abruptly shutting down during the Great War. This lingering energy might create tiny disturbances, micro shifts in fabric, or flickers of static that give the impression of movement. In this reading, suburbs become electromagnetic ghosts, still living out the final second of their existence in tiny echoes. There are wanderers convinced certain pre-war robots behave differently at sunrise. They say Mr. Gutsies and Protectrons operate with slightly smoother motions during the early morning hours, almost as if their servos warm up faster. One theory suggests that the materials used in their internal wiring become more conductive under a specific hue of sunlight, particularly the reddish glow of dawn. If true, these robots are most alive at the day's first light, caught in a quiet synergy between natural illumination and forgotten engineering. It gives sunrise in the wasteland an almost spiritual feeling, as if even machines feel reborn with each new day. A subtle theory proposes that the glowing fungi in Fallout aren't radioactive by accident, but intentionally bioengineered as emergency markers. Their blue-tinted glow, seen in caves and abandoned tunnels, acts as a natural guidance system. Perhaps pre-war scientists modified spores to respond to radiation, causing them to ignite with bioluminescence in the presence of fallout. If so, these glowing patches become silent safety signs, guiding wanderers through the dark, illuminating paths away from deadly hotspots or toward secret exits. Their glow feels like the wasteland's version of breadcrumbs, soft lights left behind by a world that hoped someone, someday, would find the way home. In the Mojave, some scavengers believe that the dust storms carry more than sand, they carry sound. During strong winds, the howling shifts into tones that resemble distant voices. The theory suggests these storms pick up microscopic fragments of glass and metal from bombed cities, turning them into natural speakers. As wind rushes through these particles, they vibrate in oddly harmonic ways, producing whispers that sound like radios, faint music, or even conversation. This phenomenon blurs the line between physics and haunting, making it unclear whether the wasteland is speaking or simply remembering. There's an idea that pre-war elites had access to a hidden network of vaults completely separate from Vault-Tech's public roster. These vaults were rumored to be luxurious, even utopian, designed for those deemed essential to rebuilding the world. However, no evidence of them remains, only stories of vault doors that were never found and signals that don't match any known location. Some theorists think these vaults were built so well they're still sealed, thriving beneath the earth with generations of people who never resurfaced. If true, the wasteland might not be the only surviving world. There could be entire hidden civilizations living quietly below, untouched by the chaos above. Another theory suggests that the Enclave's technology survived so long not just because of engineering, but because of environmental synergy. Their armored outposts, their radio towers, even their power armor seem to remain intact longer than anything else. Some argue that the Enclave built their structures using materials designed to self-repair when exposed to certain frequencies of radiation, ironically making the post-apocalyptic environment ideal for longevity. In this way, the wasteland itself becomes their guardian, preserving their machines long after the organization's power fades. Some believe that the Commonwealth's synths possess internal clocks that sync subtly with atmospheric changes. During radstorms or solar bursts, synths behave differently, slower, quieter, more pensive. According to the theory, their neural chips may be designed to adapt to radiation levels, reducing activity to prevent data corruption. But this adaptive behavior can look hauntingly emotional, like the synths are experiencing fear or melancholy in response to the changing sky. If synths have emotional resonance tied to weather, then they may understand the wasteland's mood in ways humans cannot. In quieter corners of the wasteland, wanderers sometimes find fully intact houses with food on the table, beds neatly made, and doors untouched for centuries. One theory imagines that these homes were part of government-funded preservation projects, experimental neighborhoods built to test materials capable of surviving nuclear winters. Their untouched appearance becomes a haunting monument to perfection, places created not for living but for lasting. Standing inside them feels like stepping into a still life, a world frozen intentionally, waiting for someone to judge the experiment's outcome. There is a theory that the wasteland's night sky isn't entirely natural. Some claim certain stars flicker in patterns too steady to be cosmic. These flickers may be ancient satellites, blinking in and out of sunlight, tracing orbits with the precision of machines that refuse to die. In this theory, the stars you see might not be stars at all, but the last working pieces of old-world surveillance technology. If true, the sky becomes a graveyard of metal ghosts, watching silently from above. Some wastelanders believe the reason certain ruins emit faint humming noises isn't machinery, it's the Earth's crust shifting beneath irradiated pressure points. Radiation penetrates soil differently depending on element composition, causing micro-expansions and contractions that create tiny resonant tones. These hums, barely perceptible, form a kind of melody across the wasteland, a geological lullaby shaped by the scars of war. According to this theory, the land isn't haunted by spirits, it sings because it remembers. In New Vegas, there are rumors that the Strip's neon lights pulse in time with subtle shifts in the Mojave's magnetic field. At certain hours, the lights seem to shimmer just slightly out of sync, creating the illusion of breathing neon. Some theorists believe that Mr. House designed the signs to tune themselves to ambient electromagnetic energy, feeding off the invisible remnants of old satellite power grids. If so, the Strip is alive in its own way, a glowing oasis that inhales and exhales light. Another theory claims that the mutated wildlife in the wasteland move with uncanny coordination because the radiation deepened instinctual communication. Creatures like radstags may use low-frequency sounds humans can't perceive, coordinating movement across miles. These silent signals create what looks like random behavior, but might actually be an elaborate communication system. Under this idea, the wasteland is filled with invisible conversations, an entire ecosystem whispering beneath the threshold of human hearing. Some believe that Pip-Boys contain dormant functions far beyond what players see. They speculate that early versions of the device were designed to interface with classified systems, capable of detecting hidden sensors and locks scattered across America. The theories claim these dormant features occasionally trigger, without warning, momentary flashes, unexplained pings, flickers in the map screen. If the Pip-Boy was built to be a universal key, then perhaps its quiet glitches are not malfunctions, but attempts to communicate with forgotten machines still waiting in the dark. And finally, there's a soft, comforting theory that drifted into the wasteland over the years, that the only reason humanity survived at all is because the world refused to let it end. Some say the radiation storms shift away from settlements on purpose, that resources seem to appear in convenient places not because of randomness, but because the land is tired of death. According to this idea, the wasteland is gently guiding its survivors toward a new chapter, nudging them with whispered winds, glowing fungi, and the soft hum of forgotten machines. It paints Fallout's world not as a graveyard, but as a guardian bruised, battered, but still watching, still hoping. There are theorists who believe that the strange hum echoing through certain abandoned subway tunnels isn't infrastructure decay, but the remnants of a forgotten transportation system designed to shift entire train cars between districts without passengers realizing it. Some argue that the pre-war government intended to control movement patterns by subtly rerouting specific trains, altering the flow of commuters in ways that shaped population behavior. When you walk into a tunnel and feel a vibration beneath your feet, the idea suggests it's the heartbeat of an old mechanical giant trying to finish a route it began centuries ago, still attempting to push unseen passengers toward a destination that no longer exists. The tunnels feel like hollow veins beneath a dead civilization, pulsing with the last echoes of an engineered choreography that never truly stopped. A quiet theory whispers that certain bunker doors scattered across the wasteland don't open because their locking systems still wait for codes that were never delivered. According to this idea, some were intended to open automatically if specific world events took place, events like reunified governments returning to power or the restoration of national stability. Those conditions, of course, never arrived, leaving the doors forever sealed in anticipation of a future humanity failed to create. Survivors who press their ears to the metal swear they can sometimes hear faint internal clicks, as though the vault machinery tests itself periodically, holding out hope that the conditions might one day be met. In this theory, the locked bunkers are monuments to optimism trapped in steel. In the remains of old radio stations, some scavengers report hearing faint piano notes at night, single keys struck slowly, echoing down hallways that should be empty. A theory proposes that leftover sound sensors still activate autonomously, playing fragments of pre-war recordings whenever they detect certain frequencies from lightning storms or distant broadcast interference. What makes this idea eerie is the notion that the world itself becomes an accidental musician, striking notes at random as storms roll across the wasteland. You might hear a soft, lonely chord drifting through static not because someone is playing it, but because the atmosphere is brushing past sensors with the tenderness of a memory. Travelers sometimes find skeletons positioned in strange, unnatural arrangements Two people sitting upright, hands folded, or entire groups facing a single ruined window. A theory suggests that these were not posed by raiders or scavengers, but by automated cleanup drones released during the final moments of the Great War. These machines, overwhelmed by mass casualties, may have attempted to organize human remains according to programming that emphasized neatness and respect. Over time, their power supplies died, leaving their work frozen in time. The result is a wasteland filled not with chaos, but with eerie order, silent vignettes of a mechanical attempt at dignity during humanity's darkest hour. There are rumors of odd static spikes that occur when you stand near certain rusted playgrounds. These bursts of interference feel too rhythmic to be accidental and are said to align with faint electromagnetic pulses embedded in old pre-war safety systems. One theory suggests that children's playgrounds were equipped with hidden sensors designed to monitor stress levels during nuclear drills. These devices may still be partially functional, detecting the emotional signatures of anyone who stands nearby. The static spikes could be the ancient machines trying and failing to perform a task they were built for, reading fear across a wasteland where children no longer play. Some theorists believe that the wasteland's foggy mornings represent more than weather. They're a symptom of lingering atmospheric cleansing mechanisms built into pre-war climate stabilizers. Certain hidden installations, now deeply buried under soil and rubble, may still attempt to filter radiation by releasing microparticles into the air. These particles diffuse light and create the thick, dreamlike haze that settles over the early dawn. The idea that the land itself tries to clean the sky each morning brings a bittersweet peace to the mist, transforming it from simple fog into an act of care performed by forgotten machines. In old pre-war schools, chalkboards often contain half-finished equations or diagrams that seem out of place. A quiet theory suggests that teachers received coded messages through educational channels, embedding subtle warnings within seemingly innocent math problems or history notes. The scattered formulas and unfinished sentences left behind may have been part of a covert effort to prepare children for emergencies without alerting the broader public. According to this idea, the chalkboards are the final traces of teachers who tried to save the next generation by turning lessons into life-saving hints, leaving symbols that now lie silent and unread among broken desks and empty halls. Some believe that Mr. Gutsy robots occasionally display bursts of uncanny emotion because their pre-war designers experimented with prototype empathy modules. These modules, imperfect and experimental, were meant to allow machines to understand human morale during battlefield conditions. Though officially abandoned, fragments of that programming still run beneath layers of combat protocols. When a Mr. Gutsy pauses before executing a command or speaks with a strangely somber tone, enthusiasts of this theory imagine the machine briefly remembering a deeper purpose, one designed not for violence, but for emotional support in a world that desperately needed it. There's a theory that the lights in pre-war street lamps blink at seemingly random intervals because they were once part of an encoded public messaging network. Before the war, the government may have planned to use blinking light patterns to guide citizens during emergencies, signaling which streets were safe or where evacuation points were located. Over the centuries, the system broke down and the remaining lamps flash with meaningless remnants of old commands. Survivors walking through ruined towns might unknowingly pass beneath a network that once guided millions, reduced to a disjointed, Morse-like flicker in the dark. Some wanderers report seeing shadows in abandoned houses that don't align with any visible object. A theory proposes that leftover fragments of hollow projectors, once used for advertising or entertainment, occasionally activate when struck by specific frequencies of radiation. These machine ghosts cast brief silhouettes across walls, creating the illusion of figures moving through the ruins. Instead of supernatural spirits, the shadows become accidental echoes of forgotten technology, replaying snippets of a world that no longer exists, flickering memories preserved in fractured beams of light. There is a theory that the color shifts seen in a radiated sky, deep reds, eerie greens, soft purples, aren't just natural fallout phenomena, but the result of atmospheric filters that were part of early missile defense systems. These filters, installed in the upper layers of the atmosphere, were designed to detect and neutralize chemical threats. The shock waves of nuclear fire may have damaged them beyond repair, causing the filters to permanently distort incoming sunlight. When survivors look up at the strangely tinted skies, they might actually be witnessing the broken remains of humanity's last defense still clinging to the air like a shattered shield. Some speculate that Enclave power armor carries embedded neural traces of its former users because its circuitry was designed to sync with soldier biometrics. These circuits might retain faint imprints of the emotions or reactions of those who once wore them, leaving new wearers feeling sudden bursts of adrenaline, fear, or calm without explanation. The theory suggests that power armor remembers battle even if the soldier inside does not, turning each suit into a kind of mechanical ghost containing echoes of every firefight and every moment of courage or terror its former users experienced. A gentle theory imagines that the reason quiet ponds and small lakes often contain clusters of glowing algae is because pre-war researchers engineered bioluminescent microorganisms to help emergency workers locate water sources at night. After the war, these organisms adapted to the new environment, absorbing radiation and using it as fuel for their soft glow. In this interpretation, the shimmering pools scattered across the wasteland aren't haunting. They're gifts from pre-war scientists who hope to help future survivors find life in the dark. The light that glows beneath the surface becomes a final act of kindness, still burning centuries after its creators vanished. Some theorists believe that the eerie creaking sounds coming from old wooden houses occur not because of decay, but because the buildings were treated with experimental temperature-reactive polymers. Designed to strengthen the wood during nuclear winters, these materials expand and contract dramatically based on atmospheric conditions. The result is a constant groaning houses, adjusting to subtle shifts in heat and radiation, singing long, low notes that echo through empty rooms. The sound becomes a voice of the wasteland itself, a chorus of structures still trying to withstand the cold. There is a notion that some raider gangs unknowingly mimic military formations from pre-war tactical manuals. Scholars argue that embedded cultural memories persisted even after the collapse of civilization, influencing the behavior of groups that never read a single book of strategy. Human instincts, shaped over generations of militarization before the bombs fell, may still guide people in subtle ways. Raider ambushes, encirclement techniques, and defensive patterns often resemble outdated battle doctrines, as if the ghosts of soldiers long dead whisper directions through instincts rather than words. A fascinating theory suggests that the rare moments when a player sees a light flicker in a building far away, even when no one is inside, aren't glitches. They're the result of pre-war emergency generators, still cycling tiny bursts of stored power at unpredictable intervals. These generators were designed to hold charge for decades, and even centuries later, some may retain enough energy to fire a single light bulb for a fraction of a second. The wasteland becomes dotted with accidental sparks of life, each flicker like a heartbeat from the world that once was, illuminating ruins for just long enough to remind travelers that silence was not always the land's defining sound. There are whispers of a theory stating that the fog surrounding certain wrecked ships carries faint metallic tastes because pre-war naval vessels were equipped with aerosolized decontamination systems. These systems may still activate on rare occasions when atmospheric pressure hits exact thresholds, creating mists infused with microscopic metal particles. This would explain why survivors sometimes feel an unsettling tingling on their tongues when near shipwrecks the machines are still trying to clean a disaster that can no longer be undone, releasing faint chemical sighs into the air. A more psychological theory claims that the uncanny feeling of being watched in certain ruins is not superstition, but an evolutionary echo. When humanity spent generations under threat of nuclear war, the instinctive sense of surveillance became ingrained. That reflex may have passed through cultural memory, amplified by environments designed to evoke both fear and nostalgia. Walking through ruins, the mind subconsciously reconstructs the presence of people who once lived there, triggering ancient survival systems. In this interpretation, the wasteland watches you only because your brain watches itself, projecting memories you never lived. Some claim the faint distortion on old televisions, even when unplugged, occurs because their capacitors trap minute fragments of electromagnetic energy from the atmosphere. When lightning storms bloom overhead, these capacitors resonate, producing ghostly flickers of static. The images that appear brief flashes, shadows, shapes become more than glitches. They're like dreams a machine is having, visual murmurs pulled from a sky still full of radiation and memory, flickering for a moment before falling quiet again. A hopeful theory imagines that certain overgrown gardens behind ruined houses survive because pre-war horticulturists genetically engineered resilient plants that could withstand nuclear fallout. Their seeds may have scattered across the wasteland, giving rise to mutated but hardy vegetation that still provides pockets of beauty. This theory suggests that the blush of color appearing among twisted metal and collapsed walls may not be mutation alone. It may be the success of scientists who dared to believe nature could endure anything. Those flowers become small victories, soft, bright defiance, blooming in a world that tried to end itself. There is a speculation that the strange, melodic hum from large pre-war factories represents the final breaths of vast assembly lines still running diagnostic loops. These machines, once powered by 200-year nuclear cells, may still cycle during certain conditions, spinning gears that no longer turn any product. The sound becomes a lullaby for the wasteland, a mechanical hymn drifting through the night, reminding survivors that industry once moved with relentless determination. In this view, ruins sing because they remember their purpose. And one final theory for this part whispers gently through the community that the wasteland is full of places where the past and present fold over each other, not through supernatural influence, but through the sheer emotional weight carried by the land. In areas where countless people face their last moments, the world feels thicker, quieter, heavier, as if time itself hesitates. Survivors who stand in these places often report strange feelings of warmth or sorrow, sensations too universal to belong to one person alone. Perhaps the wasteland keeps the emotional imprint of humanity as carefully as it keeps its ruins, storing grief and hope in equal measure beneath irradiated skies. In that sense, every journey through Fallout becomes a walk through memories, some yours, some not, all belonging to a world that refuses to be forgotten. There are places in the wasteland where silence seems almost too complete, pockets of stillness where even the wind pauses as if listening to something deeper than sound. Some theorists believe these quiet zones are remnants of pre-war acoustic dampening experiments, areas where secret government labs once tested noise-nullifying technology meant for stealth aircraft or classified field operations. When the bombs fell, the dampeners malfunctioned in strange and unpredictable ways, sinking into the earth and altering the way sound travels. That eerie, heavy quiet some wanderers walk into as if the world suddenly loses its voice is imagined as the last breath of machines buried beneath the dust, still trying to smother noise for programs that ended centuries ago. For some, these places feel sacred, like accidental sanctuaries carved by forgotten science. In the Mojave, there are ruins where radios refuse to work, not because they're broken, but because the signals twist into warped pulses of static that move like language. A theory suggests that underground fault lines created by explosions and heat waves form natural resonant chambers, turning the land into a giant receiver. Instead of broadcasting human voices, these places capture geological vibrations, shifts in bedrock, expansions of metal soaked in radiation, and convert them into patterns that mimic coded messages. Wanderers standing alone in these spaces sometimes feel like they're eavesdropping on the earth itself, listening to tectonic conversations happening beneath their feet. It's not surprising that travelers often leave these areas quickly, unsettled by the idea that the planet has its own cryptic way of talking. Another theory proposes that some of the odd lights seen moving across the sky aren't remnants of pre-war aircraft or malfunctioning satellites, but reflections created by atmospheric fractures. The Great War dramatically altered the stratosphere, leaving behind thin seams of ionized gas that bend sunlight into strange shapes. When wanderers see glowing objects streaking silently across the horizon, the theory suggests they're witnessing sunlight bouncing through layers of damaged skylight trapped in old scars, drifting like memories from the moment the bombs fell. These lights are globes of the past, replaying themselves again and again as the world struggles to knit its broken atmosphere back together. There are those who believe the wasteland contains echoes of conversations that never happened. In abandoned metro tunnels and ruined apartment blocks, faint reverberations sometimes resemble snippets of dialogue, short bursts of sound that vanish the moment someone tries to focus on them. The theory argues that extreme radiation created rare acoustic anomalies, pockets where old sounds became trapped, bouncing endlessly between collapsed walls and rubble. These sound fossils, as some call them, are fragments of the final moments before impact shouts, laughter, radio chatter, arguments preserved as permanently looping vibrations. In this idea, players wandering these ruins aren't imagining voices. They're hearing acoustic ghosts repeating themselves like grooves carved into air instead of vinyl. A softer, more poetic idea suggests that plants in the wasteland carry memories of the land before. According to this theory, radiation didn't simply mutate flora, it awakened latent survival behaviors that mimic collective memory. Trees that bend toward ruins may be seeking the warmth of human settlements they once sheltered. Flowers blooming in neat rows along old streets might be echoing the pattern of gardens that grew there long ago, mimicking the ghosts of landscapes erased by fire. In this interpretation, the greenery of Fallout doesn't just grow, it remembers, reaching toward shapes and patterns that made sense generations before humanity fell silent. There's a theory that some vaults were never meant to be survivable, not because of sadistic experiments, but because they were designed as time vaults, chambers meant to record environmental data across centuries. The inhabitants weren't test subjects, they were caretakers, meant to live long enough to initialize monitoring systems and then vanish naturally, leaving machines to record climate shifts, radiation levels, and geological changes. The vaults that catastrophically failed might have done so because they were built with minimal human sustainability in mind, focusing instead on sensors, seismic equipment, and atmospheric collectors. In this telling, the vaults aren't tragic failures. They're successful time capsules, silently cataloging a dead world for no one left to read the results. Some theorists believe that the way Deathclaws react to certain ruins may not be simple territorial instinct. There are reports of Deathclaws stopping abruptly near old military bases, circling slowly, and leaving without conflict. According to one idea, the creatures may retain faint inherited memories from the Jackson's chameleons. They were partially engineered from instincts tied to recognizing certain types of shelter, threat patterns, or environmental triggers. These ancestral whispers, though distorted by mutation, might cause Deathclaws to avoid specific places not out of fear, but instinctual caution, as if something deep in their DNA warns them away. It paints these beasts not as monsters, but as living archives, carrying ancient survival scripts humanity no longer recognizes. Another idea suggests that radiation storms are not merely atmospheric phenomena, but electromagnetic memory storms. In this theory, high radiation zones absorb decades of electrical impressions from pre-war technology computers, radios, power grids, creating a cloud of drifting data. When the storm hits, these fragments become electrified, manifesting as distorted bursts of music, numbers, or voices across Pip-Boys and radios. The storm becomes a living hard drive, swirling with lost data that briefly reconnects before dissolving again. Standing inside a radstorm might mean being surrounded by the shattered memories of millions of machines, all speaking at once through static and lightning. In the depths of the Capital Wasteland, explorers sometimes find doors that appear locked from the inside, with no clear mechanism for opening them. A theory proposes that certain pre-war bunkers used biometric seals designed to recognize emotional signatures, heart rate patterns, stress responses, and subconscious cues associated with authorized personnel. These cutting-edge security measures, never revealed publicly, might be the reason some doors simply refuse to open. Without the emotional imprint of someone long dead, the bunker remains sealed forever, its secrets locked not by metal but by feelings frozen in time. A haunting theory proposes that some robots continue to follow directives that were never meant for them. When the bombs fell, countless automated systems received corrupted emergency orders, tasks meant for other machines entirely. A lone Mr. Gutsy patrolling a canyon might be trying to reach a specific coordinate meant for an aerial drone. A Protectron wandering through fields could be following orders for a long-destroyed agricultural bot. The mismatched behavior of these machines becomes tragic. A world of robots carrying out impossible tasks, each trapped in a job meant for someone else, centuries too late to matter. One of the more mystical theories believes that the wasteland's animals don't just adapt to radiation, they harmonize with it. Yao Guai grow restless before radstorms, as though feeling a shift in the world's emotional energy. Bloatflies avoid certain ruins entirely, sensing electromagnetic echoes of past violence. Some theorists imagine that radiation became an unintentional language of the Earth, and the mutated creatures learned to read it instinctively. Humans, trapped inside their fragile bodies and pre-war logic, can't perceive these signals, but the animals respond as if listening to a song the world hums beneath its breath. Others claim that the persistent reappearance of skeletons posed in lifelike positions isn't just set dressing, but a clue to the strange physics of Fallout's universe. Some bodies sit upright after centuries, untouched by scavengers or collapse. This has led to the idea that certain locations experience microgravity anomalies caused by old fusion power cells buried underground, gently suspending motion in ways too subtle for humans to detect. The skeletons become relics, held in place by invisible forces, frozen mid-moment by the physics of a dying world. There's a belief that the Institute's teleportation technology didn't simply bend space, it bent memory. Travelers report fleeting déjà vu, strange flashes of unfamiliar places, or emotional impressions that feel borrowed. Some theorists suggest that the teleportation process entangles the traveler's consciousness with latent traces of others who use the system. These echoes may be subtle but profound, creating a mosaic of faint voices or feelings that linger like dust on the soul. Teleportation, in this view, doesn't just move bodies, it brushes them against the lives of those who came before. And finally, a theory whispers that Fallout's universe may be defined by a single unspoken rule: that humanity never truly disappears. No matter how devastated the world becomes, how mutated its wildlife grows, or how forgotten its history becomes, something, be it machine, memory, or mutation, always preserves a piece of what humans once were. Protectrons repeating their greetings, synths dreaming of unknown faces, animals circling ruins with strange familiarity, all hint at a world that refuses to let go of its people. Even after the bombs, even after centuries, the wasteland clings to the memory of humanity like a lullaby humming in the dark. The wasteland holds its quietest theories in the spaces where no one thinks to look, between the collapsed beams of old barns, beneath the rusted ribs of overpasses, and in the soft hum of wind that slips through hollowed-out vehicles left to dissolve under the sun. Some wanderers believe that the abandoned cars scattered across every region aren't simply reminders of the world's final day, but part of a forgotten evacuation attempt that failed before it even began. They say the way vehicles face outward from cities, all aligned toward highways that abruptly vanish, suggests a moment where millions tried to flee but were stopped by something other than panic. This theory imagines that early warning systems shut down interstate exits seconds after impact zones were detected, trapping civilians in artificial traffic patterns they never escaped. The cars become not just relics of fear, but markers of a final, frozen moment, a nation caught mid-flight, its roads whispering the story of a population trying desperately to outrun the sky. Another theory floats quietly among desert wanderers who swear the farthest reaches of the Mojave shift when no one is looking. According to this belief, certain dunes realign themselves between visits, forming subtle pathways that guide lost travelers toward water, shade, or shelter. They call these patterns sand memories, imagining the desert as a living organism that replays the movements of those who survived its harshness. When storms sweep through, the dunes reshape into the same angles, as though the land itself remembers where footsteps once fell. Some believe these guiding patterns are the residue of seismic pulses from underground bunkers, while others think they're signs that nature adapted into a guardian after humanity fell. In the Mojave, the sand might be more than dust, it might be a storyteller mapping hope into the earth. There's a lesser-known theory that the strange consistency of posters, advertisements, and propaganda found across the wasteland hints at a deeper psychological operation carried out by pre-war corporations. Many of these graphics share similar poses, fonts, and color schemes, almost too uniform to be coincidence. This theory proposes that major companies standardized every aspect of visual media to create a form of national conditioning, training citizens to trust authority through repetition. When survivors stumble upon these posters centuries later, the odd sense of familiarity might not be nostalgia, but the lingering effect of artwork designed to permanently embed itself into human perception. Even in ruin, the posters seem to stare back, their bright colors defying decay as though still trying to fulfill directives written into their ink. A haunting idea grows among those who travel near fog-covered valleys in the Commonwealth. Some say that during low radiation levels, fog seems to move toward warmth, campfires, lanterns, even human skin. This behavior has been interpreted as a reaction to heat currents, but a strange theory suggests something more conscious. According to this belief, the fog carries microscopic radioactive organisms that drift like spores, seeking life to observe rather than infect. These invisible motes might be remnants of biological experiments designed to survive without sunlight. When wanderers feel as though the fog watches them, the sensation could be more literal than anyone wants to believe. The mist becomes a floating archive of humanity's mistakes, sliding through valleys like a silent witness. Some players swear that the old skeletons found in strange, out-of-the-way places perched on cliffs, sitting peacefully in chairs, or curled in corners, aren't random at all. A theory suggests they were moved post-war by scavengers, robots, or even mutated wildlife that collected bones instinctively. The positioning of these remains, often in oddly sentimental arrangements, hints that something in the wasteland treats human bones with reverence. An unlikely idea proposes that certain mutated creatures developed a ritualistic instinct to return bones to stillness, arranging them in ways that resemble burial rites. It paints the wasteland in a gentler, eerier light. Even the creatures born of radiation might keep ancient ceremonies alive, drawn to quiet gestures that echo the world before the fire. Deep in the ruins of Boston, some theorists believe that the Commonwealth's underground tunnels form an accidental neural network, a sprawling web of steel and stone that mirrors the structure of a brain. When mapped, the tunnels branch like dendrites, while large chambers resemble neural nodes connected by tight, winding corridors. According to the theory, the pre-war city may have been unknowingly constructed along lines of unconscious design, influenced by thousands of workers following architectural instincts they didn't understand. After the bombs fell, the tunnels might have become a metaphoric thinker, an underground memory system storing the emotional resonance of every tragedy, secret, and struggle that played out on the surface. The city didn't just fall. It adapted into a silent mind, remembering its own destruction. In the Mojave, there are scattered claims that Securitrons sometimes turn to face distant thunder, aligning their optical sensors with storm fronts even when no threat is detected. This behavior has sparked a theory that the robots contain old atmospheric sensors capable of predicting storms, something House may have left intact for unknown reasons. But the stranger interpretation imagines that Securitrons retain fragments of civilian surveillance protocols, searching for patterns in lightning like old soldiers scanning for signals in wartime skies. The thunder becomes a ghostly code, and the robots listen as though expecting orders from a commander who will never speak again. Another theory speaks of the way electricity flows through old wiring in pre-war facilities. In some ruins, power seems to flicker in rhythms too orderly to be random, pulses rising and falling like a slow heartbeat. This inspired the idea that parts of the wasteland's electrical grid are still attempting to communicate, sending diagnostic signals across shattered circuits. These pulses might be echoes of emergency protocols triggered during the Great War, endlessly looping through dead buildings because no one is alive to turn them off. The wasteland hums softly, with the sound of a system that doesn't know it has died, a dying machine whispering its final breaths into the dust. One of the more imaginative theories suggests that certain raider groups follow patterns shaped by forgotten ancestral behaviors. Their settlements, though chaotic at first glance, often form circles, clusters, or branching shapes that resemble primitive tribal structures. The theory proposes that humanity's oldest survival instincts resurfaced after the Great War, reshaping culture not through choice, but through memory buried deep within the species. Raider camps built in spirals or rings might be echoes of ancient campsites, formed unconsciously by minds clinging to instinctual design when society collapsed. The wasteland doesn't just erase civilization, it rewinds it, peeling back layers of time until humanity remembers how it once survived before cities, walls, and governments existed. There is a quiet idea that the glowing eyes of certain mutated animals are more than simple bioluminescence. Some theorists argue that these creatures can perceive electromagnetic fields emitted by old machines, power stations, or buried wires still faintly charged. To these creatures, the wasteland might shine in invisible colors, each ruin glowing with the remnants of the past. When a glowing radstag pauses to stare at a collapsed building, it might not be curiosity, it might be reacting to surviving currents hidden beneath concrete. In this theory, the beasts of the wasteland navigate by ghosts of electricity, following trails of forgotten power lines like migrating birds sensing magnetic fields. A softer and more philosophical theory claims that the Pip-Boy isn't just a device, it's a companion that subconsciously adapts to the wearer's emotional rhythm. Some players swear that the screen's hue seems warmer in lonely places or cooler during danger. This theory suggests that the Pip-Boy's light sensor, stress indicator, and battery cycle combine to create an accidental emotional feedback loop, subtly adjusting brightness or refresh timing in response to the user's tension. The device becomes a kind of caretaker, offering its glow as a comfort in dark tunnels or tightening its interface when danger slips into the periphery. The Pip-Boy listens without ears, comforts without words. Another theory focuses on the strange consistency of echoes inside abandoned metro tunnels. Sound carries too cleanly, bouncing in ways that defy their damaged geometry. Some believe the tunnels were built with acoustic dampeners, meant to manage foot traffic noise, a forgotten pre-war innovation. But the more poetic interpretation says the echoes themselves become a kind of memory, replaying footsteps long after the people who made them have vanished. The tunnels whisper with the movement of ghosts, not spirits, but the physical imprint of sound caught between concrete ribs, replaying endlessly like a record stuck on its final groove. Scattered rumors describe robots that occasionally freeze for several seconds before resuming their routines. While most chalk this up to damaged logic cores, a theory suggests that certain robots might be processing long-lost directives received from silent, dead satellites. The robots pause as if listening, running calculations sparked by faint signals bleeding through the atmosphere. Perhaps some military programming still drifts in orbit, bouncing messages across a sky that no longer responds. Robots treat these dead signals as commands, hesitating as though waiting for clarity that will never arrive. Some theorists interpret the patterns in the placement of abandoned toolboxes, mines, and crates as evidence that pre-war workers followed specific rituals of safety and organization. These objects appear in strange places, empty lakes, rooftops, or deep caverns, as though scattered by some unseen logic. According to this theory, many workers fled mid-shift during the Great War, leaving their tools behind in formations dictated by routine. In the ruins of workshops, the placement of tools reveals the final motions of workers trying to understand what was happening, frozen in time by their panic. Every toolbox becomes a snapshot of someone's last ordinary moment, preserved across centuries. Another odd theory whispers that mutated plants, particularly silt beans, tarberries, and various fungus clusters, aren't just reacting to radiation, they're listening to it. These plants may convert radiation into chemical signals, essentially interpreting it as a kind of music. Their growth patterns follow rhythmic cycles aligned with radiation waves, blooming or retracting based on the song of the wasteland. Some wastelanders claim crops grow differently when near certain ruins or bodies of water, as though responding emotionally to the land's memory. The wasteland becomes a garden that grows not from soil, but from sorrow. Finally, there's a theory that rests gently over every corner of Fallout's world, the idea that the wasteland dreams. According to this belief, the world drifts through cycles of danger and calm, like a slumbering creature shifting under blankets of dust and time. Raiders appear in bursts, as though driven by a restless twitch in the land. Animals migrate according to unseen pulses. Weather changes like thoughts drifting between memories. Under this theory, the wasteland isn't simply a stage for human stories. It's a sleeping giant, dreaming of the world it used to be. Every whisper of wind, every shifting shadow, every lingering echo becomes the breath of a world half awake, quietly remembering what it once meant to be alive. There are quiet places in the wasteland where the wind seems to hesitate, drifting across ruined earth with a kind of cautious intelligence, as though it knows the land remembers more than it lets on. Some wanderers say these still patches, those rare spots where the air stops moving, occur near unseen fault lines where electromagnetic scars from the Great War still pulse faintly beneath the soil. According to this theory, the world experiences micro-reverberations of the detonations that reshaped it, echoes of explosions that happened centuries ago, yet somehow continue to throb silently just beneath the crust. When the wind pauses, the theory claims you are standing on one of these ancient resonance points, a place where the planet itself inhales slowly, remembering the moment its surface was forever changed. There is a widespread idea that the strange glow of certain irradiated ponds represents something far deeper than simple radiation. Some believe these glowing patches of water are sites where the chemical remnants of pre-war environmental experiments mixed with fallout, creating pockets of memory fluid liquid that reacts to proximity by shifting intensity, almost as if it recognizes movement or emotional presence. Wanderers who camp beside such ponds sometimes report seeing their reflections distort in strange, familiar shapes, like the water momentarily forms faces from people you've forgotten or moments you never lived. The theory suggests this isn't hallucination, but emotional imprinting, the water responding to the observer's subconscious in ways science no longer understands. There's a lesser-known theory about Mr. Gutsy units that insists their aggressive personality modules were never meant for battle, but rather for interrogation. According to this idea, their stern tone, clipped speech, and patriotic fury were designed to be used in psychological experiments, assessing loyalty through stress responses. When the bombs fell, many of these units were still mid-simulation. Their aggression toward wastelanders may not be due to combat routines at all. It might be them continuing a decades-old interrogation protocol, still evaluating civilians based on a checklist of emotional triggers. To them, the war never ended. They are simply stuck in the middle of a test that no one survived to conclude. Some theorists believe the strange metallic ringing heard in old metro tunnels is not dripping water, nor loose metal shifting, but the remnants of an underground notification system that once activated during emergencies. Pre-war cities often installed seismic sensors beneath subway lines, and certain theorists argue that the faint chimes are the last fragments of these sensors reacting to subtle quakes or heavy footsteps above. It creates the eerie sense that the tunnels themselves are alive with ancient vigilance, still warning no one about dangers that no longer exist. In this theory, every faint chime is a message ringing indefinitely into the emptiness. There is a comforting theory about wasteland dogs that insists they are far more attuned to the emotional landscape of the world than humans. Wanderers claim that dogs often pause at ruins where tragedies occurred, whining softly or refusing to enter without explanation. The theory proposes that dogs can sense memory radiation, not literal rads, but lingering emotional signatures left behind at the moment of death. This would explain why they sometimes bark at empty corners or refuse to sleep near certain structures. Perhaps they are not afraid of ghosts, but merely acknowledging faded sorrows the world hasn't yet forgotten. Another idea suggests that power armor wasn't originally intended as a battlefield suit at all, but as a prototype for deep space exploration. Supporters of the theory point out that the insulation, pressure resistance, and internal life support modules align more closely with the requirements for surviving vacuum exposure than with urban warfare. According to this interpretation, humanity wasn't preparing for nuclear conflict. They were preparing to leave Earth entirely. The weapons and armor that now dominate the wasteland may be the remnants of a civilization gearing up for a future that the bombs stole from them. Power armor, in this telling, isn't a symbol of war, it's a broken promise of escape. There's a peculiar theory about the children who wander around various settlements in Fallout games. Many players have noted that children rarely leave their home areas, as though confined by invisible boundaries. One theory suggests that children in the wasteland possess an instinctual sense of invisible radiation pockets and avoid them subconsciously. The idea claims their developing brains are more sensitive to background noise the rest of humanity has learned to ignore. Their refusal to travel far becomes instinctual self-preservation, a new kind of evolutionary compass, guiding them away from danger without ever explaining why. Some wanderers insist that certain raider groups share uncanny similarities in behavior despite never interacting with one another. Their rituals, graffiti styles, and violent outbursts follow eerily similar rhythms. This theory imagines that raider psychology may have been shaped by a subconscious cultural echo, perhaps remnants of pre-war propaganda that encouraged aggression, chaos, or tribal identity. If violent emotional patterns were embedded into decades of media before the bombs fell, then raider culture could be the wasteland's involuntary inheritance, a shadow of forgotten societal conditioning. According to another rumor, the strange glowing moths, sometimes seen near irradiated areas, may not be simple mutations, but descendants of genetically modified insects engineered for early warning radiation detection. These insects could have been created to guide civilians to safe zones after nuclear strikes, glowing brighter as radiation increased. If this theory is true, then the wasteland's eerie, shimmering moths are not horrors, they're guides from a forgotten plan, still trying to protect humanity long after the world they were made for disappeared. Some believe that the heart of the Institute, the glowing reactor that hums beneath its pristine white floors, possesses more functionality than even the scientists acknowledge. Certain anomalies in power usage patterns suggest that the reactor occasionally generates surges, not directed toward Institute systems at all, but outward into the wasteland. These bursts could be attempts to stabilize electromagnetic fields or to dampen radiation spikes in surrounding regions. If true, the Institute may unknowingly be preserving the wasteland from deeper decay, their secret reactor acting as a lifeline rather than a threat. In this interpretation, the Institute is not the villain many believe it might be. The only thing stopping the Commonwealth from collapsing back into uninhabitability. There is a deeply philosophical theory that humanity itself carries faint, inherited memories of the Great War. The idea stems from how characters across all Fallout games react instinctively to certain sounds, the distant rumble of explosions, the buzz of emergency alarms, the whine of sirens, as though something deep within them remembers. According to this theory, the trauma of nuclear destruction embedded itself so powerfully into the collective subconscious that even generations later, survivors' bodies respond before their minds do. Fear is passed down like an heirloom, encoded in instinct rather than memory. Some theorists suggest that the strange monolithic radio towers scattered across the wasteland once formed a vast communication network designed not for civilians, but for artificial intelligence. These towers could have allowed pre-war AI to communicate with one another across enormous distances, creating a shared neural network that outlived its creators. If these towers still pulse faint signals through the atmosphere, then the wasteland might contain the remnants of a sleeping machine, mind stretching from coast to coast, too fragmented to awaken fully, but too resilient to die entirely. There is a gentle, hopeful theory about the strange glowing flowers found scattered across radiation-heavy regions. The theory claims these plants evolved not as mutants, but as natural remedies, flora that adapted to absorb and neutralize radiation over centuries. Their glow, in this interpretation, represents the cleansing of toxicity. Some wanderers believe that if given enough time, perhaps hundreds of years, these plants will purify the earth, slowly stitching together the environmental wounds left behind by war. In this vision, nature is not the wasteland's victim, but its quiet healer. Another theory proposes that the ghosts encountered in certain fallout locations aren't supernatural at all, but electromagnetic hallucinations caused by leftover microbursts of energy. These bursts could capture entire seconds of pre-war life, replaying them like broken film reels whenever someone steps into the right resonance. Seeing a figure vanish at the end of a hallway or hearing a whispered conversation in an empty room might be nothing more than the environment rewinding its last memories, showing flickers of a world that once was. Some thinkers claim that sentry bots are not merely patrol units, but relics of a forgotten experiment in robotic autonomy. Their strange pauses, directional shifts, and seemingly emotional reactions might be artifacts of early neural learning modules that were never fully disabled. These dormant systems could be waking up slowly across the wasteland, causing old machines to behave like evolving animals, curious, cautious, and eerily aware. There is a chilling theory about radiation storms that insists they follow emotional patterns rather than meteorological logic. Wanderers notice storms rolling in after major battles, deaths, or moments of intense tension. It's as if the atmosphere responds to upheaval, feeding on fear or grief like a living thing. In this interpretation, storms form not because of weather conditions, but because the land senses conflict and reacts protectively, sending winds to cleanse the emotional residue from the air. Another theory suggests that pre-war scientists used music as a form of encoded communication. Their old jingles, commercials, and theme songs may contain hidden patterns meant to activate memory or trigger calmness during crises. That familiar warmth you feel when a 200-year-old song drifts across the wasteland might not be nostalgia. It could be the intended effect of subliminal design, a melody built to soothe fear during nuclear fallout. Some wanderers believe that feral ghouls occasionally exhibit moments of clarity, not through recovered memory, but because certain sounds or smells temporarily stabilize the damaged neural pathways of their mutated brains. A feral ghoul standing still in the rain might be experiencing the faintest glimmer of peace, a brief return to humanity brought on by environmental cues it doesn't understand. These moments don't last, but the theory suggests they happen often enough to imply that feralization is not absolute, just overwhelming. A strange but comforting theory proposes that traders across the wasteland subconsciously synchronize their routes based on the movement of star patterns. Without maps or clocks, their instincts follow celestial rhythms the same way migrating birds once did. This would explain why certain merchants seem to appear at the perfect moment, as if guided not by chance but by cosmic timing. And the final theory in this part imagines that somewhere deep beneath the wasteland, far below the ruins and vaults and forgotten laboratories, the Earth still dreams. It holds memories of forests, oceans, cities, and voices, and releases them softly through wind, static, and distant storms. According to this belief, the world itself whispers to those who roam it, not to frighten them, but to share the burden of its remembering. The wasteland may be broken, yes, but it is not silent. It is thinking, grieving, healing, and hoping, just like the wanderers who walk across its fractured skin. The deepest corners of the wasteland often feel like they hold their breath, as if every ruined street and broken overpass remembers something important but can no longer speak it aloud. One of the quieter theories suggests that the cracked highways stretching across every region were designed with hidden resonance markers, slight indentations, and angled barriers intended to guide sound waves along their length. Pre-war engineers were obsessed with acoustics, and some believe the highways were meant to carry evacuation signals across vast distances, ensuring survivors could follow the faint vibrations to safety, even if radios failed. Now, centuries later, travelers report moments where the wind rushes through these structures and creates low hums that feel almost like voices. Not messages, exactly just the echo of a world that tried desperately to prepare for its own end, humming warnings no one remained to hear. Another theory focuses on the peculiar consistency of elevators in the Fallout universe. Even after 200 years, many elevators still work far longer than physics or engineering should permit. Some believe these machines were secretly designed to draw minute energy from environmental static, radiation, or even geothermal heat. According to this theory, elevators were constructed by companies contracted with the military to serve as emergency evacuation systems during catastrophic events. The reason they still run isn't just durability, it's because they were meant to function indefinitely, waiting for survivors who never came. When an elevator in a forgotten bunker groans to life at the touch of a button, it feels like the machine is sighing in relief, grateful to finally fulfill the purpose it waited centuries to serve. A quieter and more personal theory imagines that certain companions in Fallout exhibit behaviors that imply faint paranormal sensitivity. They often comment about places they've never visited, express sudden concern in long empty rooms, or react strongly to objects with deep emotional history. Some fans believe the companions aren't simply knowledgeable, they're subconsciously aware of emotional hotspots, places where trauma, fear, or hope linger like footprints. This theory suggests that lingering psychic residue shapes how people feel in certain ruins, making companions draw their weapons early or hesitate before entering a room. Their behavior becomes a soft reminder that not all ghosts in Fallout howl or rattle chains. Some are simply memories caught in the walls. In the cold corners of the Commonwealth, there's a strange phenomenon where streetlights flicker in seemingly deliberate patterns. Most assume it's just faulty wiring or old fuses, but others insist the flashes resemble coded signals. According to this theory, pre-war emergency systems embedded in power grids attempt to reboot themselves occasionally, broadcasting survival alerts through light instead of radio. These flickers might be leftover instructions telling a long-dead population where to run or what to avoid. Travelers have noticed that certain flickering light posts align with old evacuation routes, implying the grid is still trying to shepherd survivors toward imagined safety. The idea transforms a simple streetlight into a grieving sentinel, one that refuses to let go of its final assignment. Far in the western deserts, there's a rumor that the Mojave itself might be shaped by a looping weather algorithm that predates the Great War. Some theorists propose that pre-war scientists created a climate simulation program designed to counteract desertification. When the bombs fell, the system malfunctioned, but didn't fully fail. It began repeating the last stable weather pattern over and over, trapped in an infinite cycle. This could explain why certain regions of the Mojave maintain near identical temperatures year-round. If true, the wasteland isn't simply dry because of the bombs, it's dry because an ancient machine is stuck trying to fix a climate it no longer understands. The sun becomes less a natural phenomenon and more a glitch burning eternally overhead. A theory about the Minutemen proposes that their symbol, the star, might be tied to something older than the faction itself. Some believe the star resembles an old classified military emblem associated with civil defense units before the Great War. The Minutemen reviving it may have been coincidence, or perhaps one of the founders stumbled upon forgotten manuals and rebuilt the faction around lost ideals. Their mission to protect settlements mirrors rumored pre-war mandates for national volunteer defense networks designed to mobilize in case of domestic disasters. Under this theory, the Minutemen aren't just a group trying to restore peace, they're the last spark of a forgotten project echoing through time. Another peculiar idea suggests that the odd glitch in which NPCs stare at you before speaking might not be a glitch at all, but the result of subconscious behavior scripts created by pre-war psychologists. The theory proposes that characters in Fallout were coded with subtle mimicking behaviors designed to establish emotional connection. When they lock eyes before speaking, they're replicating real-world social bonding patterns. After decades of decay and programming drift, the behavior appears uncanny, but originally it may have been intended to make interactions feel warm, familiar, even comforting. In a world with few comforts left, the lingering impulse to connect through eye contact feels strangely human. A haunting theory speculates that the pre-war world never fully mastered nuclear power. Instead, it discovered something else, an unstable form of quantum energy disguised as nuclear technology. According to this idea, radiation in Fallout behaves unlike real radiation because it's not radiation in the traditional sense. It mutates selectively, changes environmental physics, and occasionally exhibits behavior that resembles memory preservation. If this energy was meant to revolutionize industry but was poorly understood, the bombs might not have simply exploded. They might have fractured the fundamental rules of reality in every region affected. The wasteland becomes less a ruin and more a canvas painted by unpredictable physics. There's a theory about the Capital Wasteland's subway tunnels that suggests they weren't primarily built for civilian travel at all. Their strange depth, complex junctions, and numerous inaccessible sublevels imply a secondary purpose. Some fans believe the tunnels were part of a hidden evacuation network designed to move high-ranking officials beneath the city to secret government shelters. The vast number of collapsed passageways, blocked doors, and improvised barricades suggests frantic use during the final hours before the bombs fell. This theory imagines thousands of people fleeing underground, creating a human tide that the infrastructure was never meant to support. When players explore those dark tunnels, they may be walking through the freeze-dried panic of a city trying desperately to escape a fate it couldn't outrun. A softer theory involves the strange emotional stillness of the wasteland at night. Some survivors report that sound seems to travel farther, footsteps echo more gently, and the wind feels almost warm despite the cold. This idea suggests the night itself might be a natural psychological sedative, an unintended side effect of the atmospheric changes caused by the Great War. Radiation particles and altered atmospheric density could create frequencies that subtly calm the human mind. Nighttime becomes a blanket of soft vibrations, cushioning survivors from the harshness of daylight. Under this theory, the wasteland sleeps too, humming a quiet lullaby that helps its scattered inhabitants survive just one more day. Another belief centers around the strange consistency of medical items found scattered across ruins: Stimpaks, Radaway, Med-X, and blood packs that still function long after expiration dates. While most chalk it up to game logic, some theorists imagine a deeper explanation. Perhaps pre-war pharmaceuticals were engineered with self-preservation in mind, using nanobots or chemical preservatives meant to activate under extreme temperatures and radiation. If true, every Stimpak you find isn't just a simple medical tool. It's a miracle of forgotten technology designed to keep healing even when the world stopped needing it. These supplies become archaeological artifacts of compassion, pre-war scientists' final attempt to ensure anyone, would survive. A darker theory suggests that the Enclave's power armor suits contain faint neural residue from previous users. Over time, the helmet's HUD flicker or odd calibration glitches might be echoes of past soldiers who wore the armor in their final moments. Neural feedback loops were used to improve reaction time, meaning some imprint of a soldier's instincts might linger inside the suit's circuitry. When players feel unusually confident or strangely anxious in power armor, this theory imagines it's the suit subtly influencing them, whispering emotional remnants of someone who fought and died wearing the same plates of metal. And then there's the strange behavior of robots who wander ruins without purpose. Protectrons that patrol empty rooms, assaultrons staring at walls, sentry bots stuck, repeating the same steps endlessly. A gentle theory imagines they're following ghost routines, encoded habits from workers who once gave them orders. These machines, unable to accept that their purpose vanished centuries ago, continue their loops like ritual prayers. Every step they take is a memory relived, a tiny piece of the old world desperately refusing to fade. In the western mountains, some believe that strange howls heard at night aren't mere animals, but echoes of old sirens distorted by distance and time. The Great War's alarms were so loud, so constant, that their vibrations supposedly imprinted into the landscape itself. Winds catching the right angle might replay these frequencies like a phonograph needle. What survivors hear, then, isn't a creature, it's a ghost of sound, the land remembering its final moments before fire consumed it. A softer theory imagines that settlements thrive not only through leadership, but through subtle atmospheric luck. Some towns unknowingly form on pockets of clean air or stable magnetic fields, conditions that create calmer weather and healthier crops. These breathing spots, as some call them, might be natural sanctuaries the wasteland has preserved like small blessings. The world, though broken, seems to leave safe pockets for those who need them most, places where violence feels distant and nights feel almost peaceful. Others believe that the reason companions seem drawn to the player isn't just narrative design, it's the universe trying to repair itself. A wanderer traveling alone is a vulnerable thread of patience and hope. When someone joins them, the wasteland becomes slightly more stable, like a stitch tightening across a torn piece of cloth. Companions are not merely allies, they're manifestations of a nuclear world trying to mend the social fabric that the Great War annihilated. Under this theory, every friendship is a healing scar on the face of a broken planet. Near old train stations, seasoned explorers sometimes hear faint rhythmic thuds echoing through the rails. The theory proposes that underground maintenance drones, buried or forgotten, might still be active, slowly repairing tracks no one will ever use again. Their movements could be sensed through metal but remain hidden to the eye, turning abandoned railways into veins where forgotten machines still pump life into an infrastructure that died long ago. A track humming beneath your feet becomes a reminder that not everything in Fallout gave up. Some theorists suggest that the wasteland's wildlife evolved not randomly, but in ways that reflect human psychological fears. Giant insects, mutated predators, and oversized mammals mirror exaggerated versions of creatures people feared before the war: scorpions, bears, wolves, and snakes. Radiation didn't just warp biology, it shaped creatures according to humanity's collective anxieties, making monsters out of nightmares. The wasteland becomes a canvas where human fear paints its own predators. And finally, there is a gentle theory whispered in campfires and lonely outposts that the wasteland wants people to live, not through miracles or magic, but through subtle alignments of luck, rare weather breaks, untouched food caches, safe paths through rat-infested ruins. The idea suggests the universe isn't indifferent. It's quietly rooting for life. In a world defined by loss, the land still tries to guide travelers toward warmth, rest, and quiet moments of peace. It's a comforting belief that even after everything burned, something in Fallout's world still hopes. The deeper you wander into the wasteland, the more it begins to feel like a place built on quiet patterns that no longer remember their own origin. There is a theory that the strange consistency of ruined storefronts, their doors cracked at identical angles and their windows broken in the same repeating shapes, is not a coincidence of destruction, but a subtle architectural resonance built into pre-war materials. Some believe the glass manufactured in the late 21st century had embedded stress lines designed to fracture predictably under pressure, making cleanup and reconstruction more efficient after natural disasters. When the Great War happened instead, those predictable fracture patterns replicated themselves across thousands of towns, leaving the wasteland with a strangely uniform signature of ruin. According to this idea, every shattered window in Fallout carries the ghost of a plan meant for a disaster far smaller than the one humanity received. There is another theory that the old Red Rocket stations weren't intended to be simple fuel stops, but part of a sprawling logistical grid designed to act as emergency shelters in the event of a prolonged crisis. The consistent layout, the reinforced floors, the hidden maintenance hatches, and the strangely durable signage all hint that Red Rocket might have been preparing for something long before the bombs dropped. Some believe the corporation had secret contracts with federal agencies, turning their stations into potential community hubs, stocked with water purification tablets, emergency radios, and encrypted guidance terminals that were never activated. In this theory, Red Rocket's bright red rooftops weren't just eye-catching marketing, they were unlit beacons, waiting for a world that never reached them in time. Travelers who spend enough time navigating the old subway tunnels begin to notice that some stations seem to resonate faintly, their concrete vibrating with low hums that don't match the sound of far-off generators. There is speculation that these vibrations come from a relic of pre-war experiments meant to stabilize underground structures during earthquakes. Engineers may have built oscillation dampeners into the infrastructure, devices that continue trembling decades later, even with broken wiring and fractured foundations. The intermittent pulses become something like the heartbeat of the tunnels, memories of the engineers who once imagined cities surviving through careful precision. The wasteland turns those forgotten systems into strange lullabies echoing through forgotten halls. One theory proposes that the pre-war military secretly experimented with artificial emotional regulation in soldiers through subliminal signals. According to this idea, certain repeating tones in military bases, tones players sometimes hear without realizing, were part of experimental conditioning techniques. These audio cues were meant to reduce panic, sharpen focus, or induce aggression depending on the mission. After the bombs fell, the tones became ghost frequencies embedded into metal corridors, activating whenever power flickers in abandoned bunkers. Some wastelanders report feeling eerily calm or suddenly anxious while passing through these old halls. Whether these sensations come from sound waves or from the heavy weight of history pressing inward is left to the imagination. There are wanderers who swear that late at night, in areas untouched by human civilization, the stars seem slightly misaligned compared to the pre-war charts found in observatories. This discrepancy has fueled a theory that the nuclear detonations subtly altered Earth's rotational axis, causing the sky itself to shift. Others take the idea further, speculating that experimental anti-ballistic missiles might have disrupted gravitational fields for a moment, warping astronomical paths. Regardless of the scientific plausibility, the feeling is unnerving. That even the stars above Fallout no longer exist exactly where the old world left them, as though the sky mourned and rearranged itself after watching everything fall. In abandoned libraries across the capital wasteland, some theorists point to the way books decay in strangely consistent patterns, with certain genres surviving longer than others. Adventure novels, survival guides, and manuals often appear in far better condition than romance, drama, or children's stories. According to this theory, publishers use different blends of ink and binding glue depending on the predicted longevity of certain genres. Manuals and guides received long-lasting chemicals meant to preserve critical information, while entertainment-focused texts used cheaper materials. 2 centuries later, this difference manifests as a ghostly hierarchy of knowledge, the wasteland itself subconsciously preserving what could help survivors the most. There is a theory that the rare pre-war holograms, especially those found in military bases or secret research stations, are not simply echoes of recorded data, but fragments of an unfinished project meant to transfer human identity into quantum light signatures. These holograms feel too reactive, too aware, even though their programming is simple. Some theorists believe that early prototypes were capable of mirroring emotional states or learning behaviors based on observers. When the bombs fell, these prototypes survived as flickering ghosts, pieces of people trapped in loops they were never meant to inhabit permanently. Their voices, frozen mid-sentence, are the closest the wasteland ever came to immortality. A recurring idea among scholars is that the wasteland's audio glitches, distant cries, unexplained footsteps, and strange clicking noises might be remnants of neural data encoded in the environment. Certain scientific papers recovered from old labs describe experiments in mapping thought patterns using electromagnetic bursts. If these experiments advanced further than expected, some of those signals might have left imprints on metal, stone, or soil, replaying faint echoes decades later. According to this theory, the wasteland becomes a kind of vast recording device, storing the last moments of countless lives in static memories that shimmer through abandoned places. Some theorists believe that the persistent presence of collectible toys in Fallout Grognak figures, Vault-Tec bobbleheads, and numerous dolls speaks to an intentional cultural reinforcement program designed before the war. These items were distributed so widely and in such uniform placement that their survival feels deliberate. Under this theory, the toys weren't just merchandise, they were psychological anchors meant to maintain morale unify national identity, or keep people emotionally primed for propaganda. That these figures still turn up centuries later in locked desks and forgotten bedrooms becomes a haunting reminder of an era obsessed with control through comfort. Another theory posits that the unusual behavior of wasteland merchants, how they always seem to appear at the perfect moment, might be linked to subtle radiation pulses emitted by caps. This idea suggests that the bottle caps used as currency emit a faint frequency detectable by certain mutated individuals or animals, guiding traders toward areas of active economic activity. The theory frames wasteland commerce as something almost organic, a living organism created accidentally through mutation and salvage. The wasteland's economy becomes less a system and more a natural force, drifting toward need like a river carving its own course. Those who study power armor have speculated that the frame's internal structure responds not just to user input, but to bioelectric fields produced by human emotion. Users often describe the armor feeling heavier when frightened or lighter when determined. This could simply be perception, but some blueprints hint at experimental gel layers capable of micro-adjustments based on neurological feedback. If this is true, it means power armor acts as a mirror of the wearer's emotional state, amplifying their courage or protecting them more fiercely when fear overtakes them. In this view, the armor becomes more than metal, it becomes an extension of human instinct. There are soft-spoken theories about the behavior of raiders who seem to form tribes with near-identical culture across vastly different regions. Some believe radiation subtly affects brain chemistry, pushing certain survivors toward hyper-ritualized group behavior. The matching tattoos, chants, and banners might be less learned culture and more biological imperative, a shared instinct triggered by environmental trauma. Under this idea, raider clans become the wasteland's subconscious, expressing itself through people shaped by fear, hunger, and the constant pressure of survival. Another idea imagines the glowing mushrooms that light many caves are slowly spreading across the wasteland, evolving intelligence through shared fungal networks. In nature, fungi communicate through chemical signals, and the irradiated versions in Fallout might have accelerated neural-like pathways. If true, the glowing patches could be nodes in a vast, slow-moving organism that spans miles underground, observing humans with detached curiosity. The faint light becomes not a mutation, but an eye soft, patient, watching. In certain ruined cities, some streets seem to remain unnaturally clear of debris, as though swept clean by unseen hands. One theory suggests that forgotten municipal nanobots, part of experimental cleanup systems, still operate intermittently when triggered by environmental changes. These microscopic machines may activate only during radstorms or shifts in humidity, clearing dust or rearranging rubble before falling dormant again. The result is eerie pathways that appear freshly tidied even in the most desolate places, as though the city remembers its old routines. There is a theory that some terminals in Fallout contain hidden pattern recognition software capable of detecting emotional tone in typed entries. If a user was frightened, angry, or distressed, the system might alter its responses, offering different messages or suggestions. Because these systems are now corrupted, they sometimes display sentimental or oddly comforting dialogue, as if trying to soothe whoever approaches them. The warmth felt in certain messages for no logical reason might come from these broken fragments of empathy still trying to serve humans long after their intended era ended. Trees in the wasteland often grow in strange spirals, twisting toward invisible shapes rather than sunlight. Some believe that radiation warped the Earth's magnetic field, causing plant life to orient itself toward new poles or pockets of electromagnetic pressure. Others think these spirals are signs of the planet healing itself, nature reconfiguring around scars in the soil. Wanderers sometimes feel an inexplicable calm beneath these twisted trees, as though the earth itself is exhaling after centuries of holding in the memory of fire. One haunting theory suggests that the old world advertisements, those bright posters still clinging to broken walls, contain subliminal messages that were never deactivated. Their cheerful faces, exaggerated smiles, and persistent optimism might have been part of a national morale program designed to maintain emotional compliance. Centuries of decay have left only fragments of their intended power, but travelers sometimes feel unnervingly comforted or disturbed when looking at them for too long. It's as if the posters are still whispering instructions, half forgotten but not entirely erased. There is speculation that the unusual clustering of skeletons in certain buildings reflects not random collapse, but a final attempt by citizens to follow emergency protocols. Some believe that shelters were programmed with automated announcements, instructing people to gather in specific rooms moments before the blasts. These announcements may have repeated long after power failed, guiding individuals into positions now frozen forever. The eerie placement of bodies becomes less an accident and more a last gesture of obedience toward a system that couldn't save them. Another quiet theory suggests that certain lakes and rivers glow faintly, not because of radiation alone, but because of luminescent bacteria created in pre-war laboratories. These organisms were designed to purify water by metabolizing toxins, glowing brighter in areas with higher contamination. If true, the glowing waters of Fallout aren't signs of danger, they're signs of life, working tirelessly to cleanse what humanity broke. The wasteland, in this interpretation, becomes a canvas for biological resilience rather than just ruin. Some wanderers believe the wasteland's abandoned playgrounds, with their haunting creaks and rusted swings, act as focal points for psychic residue. Children's laughter, fear, and joy may have imprinted so strongly that the structures themselves hold emotional echoes. When wind passes through them at just the right angle, it produces sounds that resemble giggles or whispers, not supernatural, but deeply human memories of moments too pure to truly disappear. And there is one final theory, whispered among night travelers who sleep beside dying campfires, that Fallout's world, its storms, its creatures, its ruins watches over wanderers with a strange tenderness. The wind softens when exhaustion sets in. The storms quiet just as a traveler reaches shelter, and the path ahead sometimes reveals small treasures placed as if by kind hands. Whether it's coincidence, luck, or an unseen design, these moments create the sense that the wasteland, despite everything, has not forgotten how to care. It's a world that broke, but not one that stopped loving the people who still walk across its scarred skin. Across the wasteland, there are places where silence feels heavier than stone, as though the world itself is listening for a voice it once knew. Wanderers who travel long stretches of cracked desert roads describe a strange sensation that the environment sometimes shifts its tone, the soft whistle of the wind growing lower or higher depending on their thoughts, like a quiet hum that mirrors emotion. This has inspired a theory that Fallout's world reacts gently to the psychological state of those who walk it, not through magic or technology, but through subtle atmospheric feedback loops created by centuries of radiation, altering the way sound carries across open spaces. According to this idea, the wasteland is not alive in a literal sense, but it behaves like a tuning fork, resonating faintly with the emotional patterns of the people who roam across its broken bones. The stillness that follows grief, the calm that settles after danger, the soft shift in the breeze when loneliness clings to the air, All of it becomes part of a world trying quietly to soothe those who survived. There's a theory that says certain abandoned military bases contain echoes of pre-war simulations, fragments of training programs designed to shape soldier reflexes. Some survivors claim that when walking down old hallways, their vision flickers for a split second, showing ghostly outlines of long-gone soldiers moving through rooms that have been empty for centuries. In this theory, these images aren't spirits or hallucinations, but residual after-images of high-intensity holograms burned into the walls like digital scars. Just as old cathode ray screens sometimes retain faint silhouettes of past broadcasts, the metal surfaces of these bunkers may retain lingering impressions of simulated battles that played endlessly during the last days before the bombs. The wasteland becomes a theater of memories written into architecture, scenes replaying softly for no one in particular, long after the actors disappeared. Some believe that when radstorms sweep across the Commonwealth, the radiation-charged clouds momentarily connect otherwise isolated machines, creating a temporary neural network of broken devices. During these storms, old terminals sometimes spark awake, robots jerk as if remembering commands, and radios chime with distorted fragments of music that haven't been broadcast anywhere for decades. In this theory, the storm acts like electricity running across a dead body, causing pre-war systems to twitch with the last hints of intelligence they once held. What wanderers hear as static might actually be fragmented conversations between forgotten machines, a world of circuitry whispering to itself as lightning stitches broken networks together for a fleeting heartbeat. There is a more philosophical theory that the world of Fallout exists in a state of perpetual, soft reboot, constantly adjusting itself to maintain some vestige of stability. According to this idea, pre-war scientists developed continent-wide environmental calibration systems to prevent ecological collapse, systems that still function imperfectly after 2 centuries of neglect. When weather shifts abruptly, or when flora grows in strange, deliberate clusters, it might be the remnants of automated terraforming protocols struggling to maintain balance. The wasteland's surreal beauty, glowing fungi, strangely symmetrical rock formations, and storm patterns with eerie rhythm becomes the result of old systems lingering like breath in a dream, trying to repair a planet that no longer follows the rules they were designed for. Others propose that the Vault-Tec experiments didn't end with the bombs, but continued through generations of survivors who unknowingly passed on conditioned behaviors. The specific ways certain communities react to scarcity, form hierarchies, or respond to trauma often mirror patterns engineered in experimental vaults. This theory suggests that Vault-Tec succeeded in shaping an entire culture's psychological DNA, priming humanity to adapt to hardship with ingenuity and resilience. In this view, the wasteland isn't a world that survived despite Vault-Tec. It's a world shaped by Vault-Tec, molded by invisible hands guiding emotions, fears, and instincts through bloodlines that never realized they were part of a continuing experiment. Some believe the strange glow that lingers in certain lakes and rivers is more than just radiation. They theorize that remnants of experimental isotopes developed for pre-war energy programs may have fused with the water's chemical makeup, creating liquids that subtly interact with human perception. According to this idea, reflections in these waters sometimes shimmer in ways that don't match the world above them, showing skies unbroken by bombs or trees that never burned. These aren't visions or hallucinations, they are chemical memories, snapshots of the world as it once was, encoded into irradiated molecules. When someone stares into these waters long enough, the past stares quietly back, not as a ghost, but as a physical echo suspended beneath the surface. In the Mojave, Wanderers often describe the sense that certain ruins feel too familiar, even if they've never been there before. This has inspired a theory that pre-war city planners standardized far more of America's infrastructure than anyone realized. From grocery stores to office corridors, from bus stops to suburban homes, many structures repeat the same design templates. This theory suggests the wasteland's deja vu isn't emotional, it's architectural. The apocalypse merely stripped away the illusions of individuality, revealing a country that had already begun to merge into one vast, interconnected structure. The ruins feel familiar because they were always meant to feel that way, part of a unified national blueprint whose remnants still whisper through cracked walls. Another theory centers around the subtle shimmer of light inside old factories, where dust particles sometimes drift in oddly synchronized patterns. Some theorists believe these patterns reflect leftover magnetic fields created by machinery that never fully deactivated. These fields may be strong enough to influence not only dust but memory, subtly altering perception and mood. Players often report feeling uneasy in certain industrial ruins, sensing an invisible pressure in the air. According to this theory, these spaces still remember their purpose, holding on to the emotional weight of countless workers who once labored within them. The factories become metallic ghosts, not haunted by people, but by purpose. There's a popular idea that the children of Adam are not just spiritually sensitive, but biologically adapted to radiation in ways no one fully understands. Some believe that prolonged exposure to rads has awakened dormant sensory receptors, allowing them to perceive subtle shifts in electromagnetic fields. Their visions, prophecies, and radiance-induced euphoria might not be hallucinations, but heightened sensory experiences. In this view, the children aren't delusional, they're evolving. Radiation doesn't kill them, it tunes them. They see beauty in glowing storms because their senses perceive a spectrum of light and energy invisible to ordinary humans. What others call madness might actually be enlightenment. Certain players believe that the Enclave's hidden bunkers served purposes far beyond military storage. According to this theory, some of these underground facilities were built to preserve intangible cultural artifacts, memories, philosophies, even fragments of human consciousness. The encrypted logs and partially erased documents found in these bunkers become the last remnants of a society trying to preserve not just bodies, but ideas. Under this interpretation, each bunker is an arc of sorts, carrying pieces of humanity's identity into a wasteland where physical survival became secondary to the preservation of knowledge. A theory about Deathclaws suggests that their territorial behavior reflects more than instinct, it mirrors structured clan systems found in prehistoric predator species. Their protective postures around nests, their communication through guttural calls, and the way they circle threats all hint at a social structure more complex than simple aggression. Some survivors believe Deathclaws were on the verge of forming primitive civilizations before humans reappeared and disrupted their evolution. In this telling, Deathclaws aren't monsters, they're the next apex species trying to carve out a culture in a world that no longer belongs solely to humans. In the quiet corners of the capital wasteland, some theorists claim that the metro tunnels hum differently depending on which direction you walk. The sound of wind shifts pitch, the drip of water echoes differently, and distant clanks seem to retreat or approach subtly. These shifts may be caused by disjointed pockets of air pressure created by structural damage, but some believe the tunnels themselves behave like enormous, accidental instruments, resonating with the world above them. When wanderers hear sounds they can't explain, they might be hearing the surface echoing down through gaps in the earth, a muffled reflection of the wasteland breathing above. There are theories that the wasteland's surviving animals are far more aware of radiation patterns than humans realize. Radstags migrate before storms appear on the horizon. Bloatflies cluster near locations where rad levels spike days later. Yao Guai avoid regions long before rad scorpions emerge from burrows. This suggests an invisible network of instinctual communication, a subtle sensing system shaped by generations of mutation. According to this idea, the wasteland's wildlife evolved a collective awareness, an ecological intuition that guides them like a shared sixth sense. The animals don't fear radiation because they understand it, responding to it the way birds respond to changing seasons. Some theorists believe the glowing embers found in burned out ruins flicker with a rhythm that mirrors human heartbeat patterns. This could simply be coincidence, a trick of the wind. But the theory imagines these embers reacting to body heat, syncing subtly with the presence of living beings. In a landscape filled with decay, this idea becomes strangely comforting, tiny sparks that remember warmth, mimicking the rhythm of life in a world where life struggles to endure. And finally, there's a gentle theory whispered by wanderers who linger too long beneath star-filled skies. The idea that the world of Fallout isn't waiting to be rebuilt, it's waiting to be forgiven. According to this belief, the lingering beauty of sunsets, the soft glow of nighttime ruins, the resilience of mutated life, and the quiet companionship of machines that continue performing their tasks, all of it feels like an apology written across the landscape. The world did not intend to break, they say. It simply broke, and now it tries, in small ways, to soften the burden of those who walk across its scars. Every pocket of safety, every silent sunrise, every moment of unexpected peace becomes a whisper from the wasteland itself, a fragile promise that even after everything, hope still lingers in the quiet places.